Hi, I'm Lynn Morgan, your slipper-shod pastor. The last thing I saw before I went to bed last night was the video that was shot in Niagara Square, showing Buffalo police officers shoving a 75-year-old protester to the pavement and then marching on by, along with their fellow officers. And I was, as no doubt you have been, deeply disturbed by that image. And so I was praying for that man and for the police and for all of us. In these past tumultuous days that we've shared together, the context for a lot of our conversations has been racism. And that's obviously a considerable problem in our society, and we ought not to kid ourselves and imagine that it is not. But the subtext for these problems is more than racism. It is power. And it is power that can be abused not only by those who wear the uniforms of police or military. Anyone who has authority over another person can abuse their power, and indeed we know stories in which they have, in fact, abused that power. Adults to children, teachers to students, employers to employees, clergy to parishioners. There is no end to the varieties in which people can take the positions they have of trust and authority and abuse them, use them for their own ends, and callously disregard the humanity of those who have been entrusted under their authority and to their care. As I was drifting off to sleep, my mind was reeling, and I was not sure which bothered me more. The casual violence with which that man was shoved to the pavement, or the casual indifference of those who maintained their coherence to their group and maintained their line and walked by him and ignored his humanity. That situation reminded me of something that happened to me some years ago now. It was in the early 2000s. You'll remember, it was when the stories of clergy sexual abuse were all over the newspapers. They had been at first broken in the Diocese of Boston, and we were reading stories about the abuse of especially boys in these parishes that had been kept hidden for years by the Archdiocese of Boston. But when those stories began to come loose, they were just inundating us daily, and people's hearts were broken, and they were also filled with ire. At that time, I was working at Christ the King Seminary, and I had been asked to conduct a wedding for one of my colleagues' adult children who was being remarried. And because they had not received an annulment, they could not be married in a Catholic church by a priest. And so they brought in, the second string, that Protestant guy who I work with, who's, not too bad. Now you know that I'm one of those oddball UCC ministers who not infrequently wears a collar. I don't always sit around in a polo shirt. I often wear a clergy collar to work at church, and almost always when I go to the hospital or to nursing homes. And I do it for several reasons. One, of course, is purely selfish in that it reminds me who I am, and it helps me conduct myself according to my calling. It also signals my availability to people so that they know if they have trouble, if they need someone to talk to pray with, that I'm there for them. And it is also a door opener. You don't get stopped in hospitals when you have a clergy collar on. You can go where you need to go without a lot of fuss. And sometimes you get free parking. And yes, I will admit, one time it also prevented me from getting a well-deserved speeding ticket. So there are advantages to wearing the collar. But there are disadvantages too. There are times when it is inconvenient to be wearing that thing. And I won't go into all of those, but I'll tell you one that occurred at that wedding that I was conducting for the friend in the seminary. It was being held in a banquet center because, of course, couldn't be in a church. And I had finished conducting the wedding ceremony, and I was, as is my wont, making a beeline to the open bar to have a gin and tonic. And I was waylaid, diverted from my purpose, by one of the guests at the wedding who was himself a Roman Catholic. And he got about 2 inches from my nose, and he began saying to me, "I've trusted you guys all my life. I've done what you've said. I always looked up to you. I listened to you even when I thought you were wrong. But I'm telling you now, I'll never trust another one of you ever again." And so on and so forth. And every part of me wanted to say to him, "Hey, I have the umpire suit on here. I know I look like a priest, but I'm not. I'm a United Church of Christ minister." And I didn't say that for several reasons. First of all, because he clearly needed to say this. And also, I needed to hear it. Because it's not as though the United Church of Christ has never had clergy sexual abuse, nor that we have never moved pastors out of parishes where there was a problem and let them go to another one, or shuffled them out of ministry without any consequences and let the people who they had victimized just go on being victims. There are none of us who are, Simon Pure in this situation. He went on in his tirade to say, "You may never have touched one of these boys, but if you didn't, you knew they were doing it, and you kept silent." And that is the crux of the matter. It is the reason why the bishops should be held to a higher standard, because indeed they were in a position to know, and almost certainly did know, and did not act on behalf of the little ones, the powerless, those without a voice, those who were being abused. That was the thing that troubled me in that picture. Not just that someone could act out in violence, not just that one person or two could abuse their powerful situation and that they could hurt someone, they could act violently and cruelly, but that the others who were near them did not intervene, did not speak up, did not stand up for the little one. This, I think, is for all of us the greater temptation. Not that we are inclined to do the wrong thing, but that we are disinclined to pay the cost to speak up for the one who has no voice. We are disinclined to stand out from those who are being wrong in whatever situation, and to do the right thing. To risk being the pariah, the outcast, the one who no one wants to talk to anymore because you violated the secret rules of the club. Well, friends, the club we belong to is the club who follows Jesus and the kingdom of God, who told us it was better that a millstone be tied around our necks and we be tossed into the sea than that we let one of these little ones stumble, that we not advocate for the one who has no power and no voice. And so I am determined that I will stand up and I will speak for those who are oppressed and have no voice and who are the victims of injustice. And I trust that if you have given your life to Christ, you too will stand up. You will find your voice. You will stand out and you will pay the cost. Because our faith and our commitment to Christ demands that we never stand idly by while there is a knee on a neck, while there is someone in need of help on the ground, while there is a child who has been hurt in front of us. this is our calling, to care for the least,